Okay, I want to call you to your attention to turn to page 9 of your program brochure, because that's where session 2 topics and speakers are listed, and you'll see we already made one adjustment with time. We'll make some other ones here as well. So our next topic is Managing Assets with a Mix of Fixes by James W. Mack, PE from CMEX. James joined CMEX in September 2007 as a Director of Market Development. In this position, he works with state DOTs, cities, counties, and other professionals to develop concrete and cement-based pavement solutions for all pavement applications. Among other things, he is currently serving as the chairman of the ACPA Board of Directors. James.
Thank you. Appreciate it. As some of you may or may not know, I used to live here in Central PA. It's very nice to be back. I got a quick question, though. Is anybody here from Texas? I live in Texas now. That's good, because you know what? Even in the gloomy days that it's been here, for the day and a half I've been here, Pennsylvania is so much prettier than Texas. It's very nice, so I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for inviting me in. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about asset management and mix of fixes. So let's see, how do I move? There it goes. So what we're going to talk about here is this is our kind of our agenda today. The deputy or the administrator from the FHWA got up, and Alicia talked about some of the MAP 21 requirements for asset management and how it's a priority for them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that just so we're all on the same page. But then I'm going to point out a couple of the industry concerns associated with what's currently being done with the asset management. After that, I'm going to talk about some of the ideas that we as a concrete industry have to maybe improve the asset management program and framework, I guess is a better term for that. And then the last part is we've been working with the MIT Concrete Sustainability Hub, and I'll explain what that is in a little bit, to help us do some research in pavement asset management. I want to highlight some of the findings they're finding. And you'll see that a lot of that stuff they're finding kind of follows on to what Jerry was talking about earlier today, where competition and diversification of the system can actually bring a lot of value to the agency. And a lot of things I hear a lot is, well, I can't afford concrete pavements, or we'd love to do concrete pavements, but we don't have the money. Well, what we're finding out is we have the money. What really matters is how we allocate the money. And so that's going to be a constant theme throughout the presentation also. It's not so much how much money do I have, but how do I allocate that money to get the biggest bang for it. So the MAP 21 legislation itself, in both the MAP 21 and the FAST Act, there was a legislation in there to develop a long-term strategic performance-based management program to maintain our highway infrastructure in a state of good repair. And in that program, they listed a bunch of components that you're supposed to take care of that needs to be in that plan. And these components are start off like looking at my pavement, tell me, what it is, what's the condition of it, how is it in good or poor condition, setting targets, and then going through what I consider this virtuous life, what is it, Lion King, the circle of life. It's the same type of thing. We're having the circle of life where we look at the pavement, see how it's performing, how do we want it to perform, what are the things we need to do to make it better, do those things, and then go back, are we getting the improvement out of the system? So it's a long-term process, but it takes into account a lot of, the thing about are we just improving our system over time. The things we've been working on most, or the states have been working on and focusing on most up until this point are the first two items, which are the listing of the assets and trying to get in there and trying to determine targets. And that's kind of where we're at this moment. So we've just really started the process, and we're just starting now to think about the other aspects of it in the life cycle planning, the risk analysis, the financial plan. And one of the things I'm going to get into is the investment strategies and how we have to evaluate the investment strategies. So let's kind of dive in a little bit about what the program or what the asset management does first. First thing I said is we need to go out and look at our systems. And for pavements, they came up with measures or metrics that we need to look at our pavements at and kind of rate how good each section is. And so FHWA has mandated, I don't know if they use the word, but they've directed the states to look at 3 metrics. For concrete pavements, it's IRI, cracking, and faulting. And for asphalt pavements, it's IRI, cracking, and rutting. They are allowing a PSR to be used if it's on a small, more or less urban application, lower speed roadways. And those for cities and stuff, but for the DOTs, it's cracking, faulting, IRI, and rutting. And what you do is you go out and look at each of those roads and you look at the condition. And if they're below a certain value, like below 95 in the IRI, that section is good. And if it's above a certain condition, like 170 on IRI, it's poor. And you go out there and essentially rate every section. And then what FHWA is requiring is that every state set targets for their network condition. And what they do is they're going to say, I want a certain part of my network to be in good shape, and I'm only going to let a certain part of my network be in poor shape. And so those are the targets that have been set by the DOTs. And the data I had from PennDOT was a couple months old, but I think this is what their targets are. And they said they're essentially 60% of my pavement has to be in good shape. And the way you determine that is for each section of roadway, for like the interstate, you look at those 3 metrics, and if all 3 metrics are good, the section's in good shape, and it gets ranked as a good section. If 2 or more of those metrics are poor, it's related as poor. Any other combination, it's fair. And so what the state has to do is say, I want so much of my system in good shape, and I'm not going to let so much of my pavement be in poor shape. And so again, the targets for the interstate in Pennsylvania are 60%, greater than 60% in good, and less than 2% in poor. And that's about where most states are going on. All this is great. This is a great way to look at it. It's getting us to look at our system, evaluate it. And why we think all this is good, and we have a lot of praise for how FHWA came up with this. They did this rulemaking. It was a very hard task for them. They had a lot of people coming at them, the industries, both the asphalt, the concrete, all the DOTs, AASHTO, everybody was pounding on them. And FHWA did a pretty good job at coming up with a rulemaking to manage and figure out how to judge our highway system. So they did a good job. And we commend them on that. We think they're using best practices. We think what they're doing is going to improve the system. And we support them to continue doing it. But we also think there were some shortcomings in with this process. And these shortcomings can inadvertently lead to poor decisions. And that's what we want to address right now. And it's not just the concrete industry saying this. Kirk Steidl, who was the executive director of the Michigan Department of Transportation, also has these concerns. He feels that some of these rules as they're set up could lead to Band-Aid or short-term solutions or fixing worse sections first and not doing proper asset management. And so we're going to kind of highlight some of the things. So these metrics they came up with, these performance indicators are good, fair, and poor. While they're good, it tells you how good your system is. They're delayed indicators. They're backwards looking. And so what happens is, by the time a section of roadway is in poor condition, I should have already done something to it. By the time it's rated as poor, as unfair, I should have known that information 3 to 5 years ago so I could start fixing that roadway. So I need that forward-looking type of information to help me get some better idea of what to do with my system. And so because I don't have that forward-looking information with it, I can start doing Band-Aid approaches. I'm just saying, I'm reactive, and I'm going to fix this section in a reactive mode. The other thing, or another issue with the asset management program, is it's intended to define the long-term goals of the agency. And the way it's supposed to be set up is the 10-year plan is kind of, you put it together, you put it there, and it's going to direct your activities and your STIP and your plans, and you move forward. The problem is the evaluation is only a 10-year evaluation. Most pavement activities, diamond grinding, thin overlays, new construction, new overlays, they all last longer than 10 years. And so I'm going through an evaluation system where my evaluation is only 10 years but my products last longer than 10 years. And so I'm not able to distinguish the difference between them. And so the asset management plan is saying, hey, you need to go and ask all these questions, but the short time period doesn't force you to ask what happens next. What do I do to my system after I do this fix? And I need something to tell me, if I do this, what's the consequence of that for this next fix, and the fix after that, and the fix after that? Because every time I spend money on that system, I'm not spending it somewhere else. And so I need to make sure I don't have lost opportunity costs. I get the best bang for my bucks. And so a 10-year evaluation period isn't long enough to cover that. And the third issue, we think this is a good issue. They're saying, hey, we need to look at the life cycle plan of our network. And FHWA has required that the agencies come up with a life cycle plan to use in their network analysis. And this is great. It's a very good step. The problem is it stops at the network level. Essentially all I'm doing, do I have a laser pointer on this? Whoops. All right. And so what it does is I put this plan together and I put it in a book and I kind of forget about it. It's not forcing me to go out on a project level and look at it and see what's the best fix for this. Essentially, this plan is like a financial plan where I decide how much money am I going to put in bonds and how much money am I going to put in stocks. It doesn't tell you anything about what stocks or which bonds you're going to buy after you decide that. So it needs to go down to the project level to evaluate what's the most cost-effective solution at the project level. So those were some of the concerns we have. And so we also had some ideas, because not only can you go to somebody and say, hey, these are the concerns, well, what are some of the solutions? And these are some of the solutions we came up with. And so generally, we need to have that forward-looking performance indicator that helps plan for the long term. And I'll get into that. And one we proposed was remaining service interval, but there are others. MIT's got one they call traffic-weighted IRI. That's another one you can do. So there are several of these you can go out and do. Next thing we need to do is we need to link that network-level analysis with the lifecycle plan to the actual project-level analysis to find out which is the best alternative for that project. And again, the network-level analysis is intended to allocate funds into reconstruction, preservation, overlays. But then at the project level, I got to say, is it better for me to do a concrete overlay? Or is it better for me to do an asphalt overlay? Which is going to have the bigger bang for the buck? Where am I going to get my greatest return? And I need to look at that. And the last thing we want to do is these asset management plans need to look at all concrete solutions. As we've been going around and listening to states do their asset management plans and we hear people talk about it, it seems to us a lot of this is code for preservation. Now, I think preservation work is a good thing, and it needs to be done. But it's not the only thing that needs to be done. We need to look at what we call a mix of fixes. We're going to talk about that. And that's a broad variety of different types of solutions, because not all our pavements are at the point where they can be done be fixed with a preservation type activities. The preservation guys like to always say, it's the right application to the right pavement at the right time. Well, if you miss any one of those things, it's not going to work. And so you need to do something after you miss one of those things. And the other thing we noticed is when we start looking at asset management plans, most of the times, the only places people think about concrete is new construction for high-volume urban interstates. Well, there's a lot of other places it can be used. And we think if you kind of open up the process and look at it in the planning stage, you might find other places where concrete can be used. So for that first opportunity, what do we want to do is we're saying adopt a forward-looking performance indicator that helps distinguish how different pavement sections perform. And the one we proposed was called remaining service interval. It's not the only one, but it is one that is forward-looking. And what a remaining service interval is it's the time to next repair. And basically it tells me how well and how long a pavement's going to perform. So if I have something with a remaining service interval of 10, it's 10 years to next repair. Now if I have something with the remaining service interval of 20, it's 20 years to the next repair. And automatically I know that pavement is better condition than the first pavement. Why? Because it's 20 years till the next time I have to repair it. it's telling me that it's going to perform longer. So it's got to be in better condition, and it's going to provide a higher level of service. And so it's given me some insight into what that pavement's like. And that's important because what happens, right now all we're looking at is the condition. And pavements that are in the, if there's two pavements in the same condition, they may not require the same amount of, or the same rehabilitation activity. For example, on pavement A, which I think is this one, the blue, thank you. The pavement A, it's deteriorating faster. This is the condition. They're both at the same thing, but it's deteriorating faster, so it's going to need different activities than pavement B, which is deteriorating at a slower rate. And how I manage those two systems are going to be different, and I need to plan for that. So that gives me some insight into the future conditions so I can do better in my investment strategies. Now, what's good about this is RSI already builds off the things we're required to do. We're required to look at cracking, faulting, and IRI. So we'll look at that, and all we do now is just say, okay, I have my target level for each section. How long will it be before I get to that point? It's one extra step. And you can project that using some very simple equations. You can do some linear regressions. You can use some modelings, but you can project that out relatively easy for that. And you look at how each of these pavements are going to deteriorate in each of these conditions. And when you hit the first one or the longest one or the shortest one, that tells you your remaining service index will be. So for this section, it's 10 years, because that's when I hit the first time of repairs. Now here's where some of the magic starts to come in. What I can do then is I can take each section and I can put it into what's called the network RSI graph. And this starts helping me plan things. And so essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating buckets for these are the projects I need to work on in my next 4 years. It's my STIP. It tells me these are my pavements, and I need to go out and fix those. And so I have, in this 0 to 4, I have about 25% of my pavements I need to go out and touch. And then some pavements that are lasting a little bit longer, I can project this out. And now I can start using this graph to help me plan what my system is, and I can use it to tell me if I'm improving my system or not. One of the numbers I want to point out here is this average RSI up there. It kind of tells me how long it is. And for this system, it's essentially 13.3 years between rehabs. So every mile of roadway, I'm going to touch it about every 13.3 years. That's what it tells me. Now what I can do with this is I can start saying, okay, what am I going to do? What's my investment strategy to improve my network? And so if I start looking at it and I say, I'm going to do a bunch of thin asphalt overlays that are going to last 10 years, I'm going to dump a bunch of pavement into that point, and all of a sudden, in 10 years, I'm going to be hit with this giant wall of all these projects I need to do. And I'm not going to have the money for this. I can't make it work. No matter what I do, I'm just going to do this. And we know this is a bad strategy because my RSI goes from 13.3 years to 11.2 years. Very simple to say, that's not a good strategy. I'm losing ground. What it to me. So instead, what I need to do is look for activities that fall into what I call structural holes, or places where there's not a whole bunch of activities already being done. And this is why we call it mix of fixes. I need some short-term solutions. I'm going to dump a small amount of projects over into the next 4 to 8 years. I'm going to do some medium-term fixes to dump them into that 16 to 24 years. And then I'm going to need some long-term solutions to dump them out there as far as possible. This is where it starts to get about allocation. It's about what am I going to allocate my money to. I need to allocate some money to long-term reconstruction type activities just to spread this system out. And so what happens is I need to open up my playbook of different types of things I'm using too. And so I need to expand the types of treatments I can look at. And again, historically, a lot of people look at concrete payments, good for high-volume urban interstates, heavy-duty rural roadways. Well, there's a lot of things we can do. There's, we got concrete overlays, we got roller compacted concrete, we're heard about full-depth reclamation with cement. There's unbonded overlays, there's bonded overlays, there's thin concrete, there's thicker concrete. There are a lot of things we can do. We can put concrete on concrete, we can put concrete on asphalt. It starts opening. Once you start looking at, hey, I need these solutions, I need these time frames, what are solutions to fit? And that's what it gets to. It starts changing how you think things. Instead of figuring out, where can I find concrete, it's, hey, I have a solution that I need 25 years. What will get me 25 years? And so what happens then is pavement management becomes a two-step process. It's like a financial portfolio. In a financial portfolio, the first thing we do when you talk to financial guys is, what's your risk tolerance? How much money do you want to put all your money in stocks? Are you willing to lose it all? And so you come up with hey, I'm going to allocate a certain amount to stocks. I'm going to allocate some to treasury bonds. I'm going to allocate some to bonds. I might do, real estate. So I want to diversify myself. And so that's what the first step does. That first step is about allocating what goes into these different categories of activities: construction, maintenance, preservation, stuff like that. Once I have those categories, I need to figure out, okay, now I'm going to buy a stock. Which stock do I want? Do I want IBM or do I want Apple? 10 years ago, that would have been a good, that's a tough decision to do, but I want Apple. That's going to give me the better bang for my buck, and that's what you need to look at, is finding that best stock or that best solution for that individual project. So you need to do it at both levels. So the question is, does this really work? And so you need to look at it, because what that's doing is driving your investment strategy. How I'm going to take that limited amount of money I have and actually make it work. And so we're going to look at two different investment strategies. The preservation strategy, a lot of people talking about it. Hey, it's where we're going to go out there. We're going to do the slurry seals, thin overlays, diamond grinding, and we're going to go out there and try to touch as many pavements as possible and try to extend their life. Nothing wrong with it. It needs to be done. It is the right thing to do some of the time. But it's not the right time for all of it. The other one is saying, hey, we're going to do that, but we're also going to not just do that. We're going to do some medium-term fixes, we're going to do some long-term fixes, and we're going to do that. So the question is, what will be my roadway condition in 20 years? And that's how we need to think, because we can no longer think about what's going to happen next year. It didn't take us 1 year or 3 years or 5 years to get to this point where our roadway is deteriorating. It took a long time, and it's going to take some time to get us there. But we need to start investing wisely now, so we need to look at the different alternatives and see what they do. So here's what the results were. So if I look at that, this top is the preservation strategy, and what you can see is often I have all these buckets of payments, and you can see it's getting relatively high. I essentially have about 30% of my payment I need to hit every 4 years. That's a lot of payment. It's just not going to happen. You don't have the budget for that. But when I go to this mix of fixes, I spread it all out. I still have a lot of payment right here, but I've spread it out, so I'm getting close to getting to the end where I'm going to be in better shape. But I can also look at, in both cases, my average RSI went down. What that means is I just don't have enough money. And that's when you can go to the legislature and guys, you're not giving me enough money. I can't fix it. I can't make it work if you don't give me more money. But then you've actually taken the money and you've allocated it better. And you know this is a better allocation because your average RSI is better. And so you can say, I'm doing the best I can, but I need more money. And so that was what we presented, and that's kind of our ideas of how to go approach it. We also wanted to see how real this is and how do you implement it. Those are all great ideas. One of the things I've been talking about as chairman is not only do we need to give somebody or motivate change, we also have to give the ability to make that change. And so we went to MIT and said, can you help us make change and do this? And so little quick side step. The MIT Concrete Sustainability Hub. Has anybody heard of it? Few of you. Okay, so that's good. What it is about 10 years ago, the cement and concrete industries went to MIT and said, hey guys, we want to figure out how to make our concrete, our infrastructure and our buildings more sustainable, and we want to make them more durable. Can you help us with that? And so we started a multi-year research program that's multidisciplinary. It looks everything from the very minute particle sizes and the nano size of the cement materials all the way up to the structural things, how they all combine together, and we look at how you measure stuff and how you do life cycle costs and life cycle assessment and how everything's judged, and combine it all together and say, how do we do this and come up with good breakthroughs? And the idea is to provide a scientific basis to help us make better decisions. And so we're kind of trying to look at it, and we need to get beyond that, just the initial impact. So, and when we started asking them, well, let's look at the asset management practices that's going on, and sort of looking at them, we presented them the stuff we have and go, can you look at this stuff and see what you see too? And they basically came back and said, the traditional asset and payment management practices that are being used by most states has some gaps in it. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is not anything nefarious by any states, and it's not because they're not trying. But what happens is when you're looking at a network like Pennsylvania, which is about 42,000 miles of roadway, trying to manage that and predict how these payments are going to perform over the next 50 years, that's a lot of computational power. And the computational power just wasn't there. And so what happened is you couldn't differentiate payment types. You couldn't consider a lot of the different structural properties of the pavement. You had to make some very general, ideas of how we're going to fix it. Just basically we're going to do some maintenance or we're going to do some minor rehabs, but there was nothing really to differentiate things in there. And so MIT said, what we need to do is figure out a way to make this computational stuff happen faster. And so what they came up with was a probabilistic framework. And so instead of saying, I need to actually predict what each of these segments of the roadway are going to behave like as closely as possible, is they literally do a Monte Carlo simulation and look at 1,000 different simulations of what each segment of roadway could actually behave like. They base it on performance things, so it's not just a number out of the air, but they do 1,000 iterations. They find out, on average, for each segment of roadway that we're analyzing, these are the top 3. And then they go to those top 3, and they put it into the network allocation, and they say, allocate this across the money across these, and fix the roadway system. So it's a much quicker allocation, and much quicker computational process. And what that allows them to do then is look at a lot of different things. Like they can differentiate pavement types. They can add structure into it. They can look at what will a concrete overlay behave like, what will an asphalt overlay behave like. They can count for price variations. And so all of a sudden you can start looking at a lot of different things. And as they've looked at this, they found out there's some key findings they found out. The biggest one, it can always be broken down to, is diversification enhances performance. You need to diversify your system in as many ways as possible. The other thing they have found out is there's a critical budget that you need to actually get the improvement performance, but how you allocate money will impact what that critical budget number is. And so they're still going through this stuff. This is some of the things they're finding out, but they're finding that an investment strategy that uses both asphalt and concrete enhances performance, and you're going to get better performance with it. Mix of fixes enhances performance, and you're going to be able to maintain your system better at a lower cost. And then you need a long-term planning horizon to account for the benefits of long-term solutions. And so here's kind of what they're presenting. Now, I'm going to explain this graph real quick, but along the y-axis we have condition, so poor condition down here, good condition up here. Along the bottom is the budget. And what this is what will my network look like at 50 years from now with different levels of budget. So what's my condition going to be? With different levels of budget and different types of things I'm going to look at. So in this case, I'm looking at what happens if I build with either asphalt only, if I build with concrete only, or if I build with a combination of both asphalt and concrete. And what we're seeing is the system that uses both asphalt and concrete actually performs better, and that critical budget comes back at a lower value. And so that means if I go out there and do that, what I'm getting is, asphalt prices, they go up and down, they spiral, they drop, all this stuff. You need to account for that variability, and if all of a sudden you don't have a system where you can easily switch to concrete at that point, you're not going to be able to capture it when those prices are high. Likewise, concrete's higher initial cost typically can limit you where you go for stuff, so you don't get as you get good improvement, but it takes longer. And the combination actually gives you options, so I can kind of adjust as things move along. Likewise, if I look at this is the mix of fixes versus a preservation-only strategy and a like a mix of fixes, or just a completely reconstruct where I basically let the pavement fall apart and then reconstruct it at that point. And what we find out is the problem with the preservation strategy is it creates lost opportunity costs. Essentially, if I touch a pavement in 10 to 12 years, I'm going to have to touch that pavement again, and that costs the agency money. So you need to go out and address that term. Mix of fixes, again, captures some of the benefits of both short and long-term solutions and allows you to lower your costs. And so again, the amount of money I need to maintain the system is in a much lower cost value. Again, it's how I allocate that money. And the last thing is looking at the time frame. And again, it's kind of all these tie together, but I need a time frame that's long enough to help me capture long-term solutions. If I'm only looking at 1 to 2 years, I'm going to pick 1 to 2 year solutions. If I'm picking a 10-year solution, I'm going to pick a lot of 11 years, or looking at a 10-year time horizon, I'm going to pick a lot of 11-year solutions. And so you need to be able to have a time frame long enough to capture what the benefits you get from those long-term options on there. So that's what they're finding out with those. So that improves the system. So it is changing how we think about the system. And we can do this. So in summary, what happens is we are required now to, by MAP 21 and the FAST Act, to do an asset management program. We think it's a good start, but there are some limitations associated with it. There are shortcomings, and if we don't correct those shortcomings, we could inadvertently lead to some bad decisions. We think we have some good solutions. With those, start having forward-looking metrics, looking forward with that, look at other options, concrete overlays, full depth reclamation, roller compacted concrete, new concrete, all these different options that are out there for both asphalt and concrete, existing pavements. And then the MIT research is also looking at it, and it's finding out that diversification is key to long-term performance. Anytime you don't diversify, you're going to get less than optimal performance. It happens in stock portfolios, and it happens in a pavement portfolio. Just make sure you try to have that long enough time frame to make sure that you understand what you can get the benefit of the diversification with that. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. And if you have any questions, I'd like to answer them. If not, I'll be around for the next day and a half or so. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.